Welcome to Hired the Podcast. I'm excited to be here today with Dustin McClone, owner and founder of McClone, a top 1% insurance broker out there, and possibly more exciting, host of Hustle Nation podcast. Dustin, how you doing today?
Fantastic. Excited to be here, Travis.
Excited to have you here.
Looking forward to this.
So I guess an easy place to start out is hustle mindset right there in front of you. Tell me about Hustle Mindset, Hustle Nation. It's it's your soapbox, man. That's what you stand on.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been an interesting journey for sure. So kind of my day job, so to speak, was running McClone Insurance. We're an insurance broker located around Wisconsin and clients around the world. And it's a third generation family business. So I took over about 6 years ago. And, at the same time, I'm also a youth basketball coach. So I coach my son's youth basketball team from 3rd to 8th grade. My wife's a youth basketball coach. And so we found ourselves sitting around at lunch a bunch of years ago. And I was talking about, I had just taken over leadership of McClone, and it was a great company, but we were stagnant. Right. And I was really trying to think about how do we unleash that potential, and kind of intermixed with that, we were talking about how do we unleash the potential of these, at that point, I think 4th or 5th grade boys basketball team, right? Which, it's the exciting stuff we talk about on the weekends. And all of a sudden, there was kind of this light bulb came on. It was hustle. And, if you've ever been to like a youth basketball game or youth sports game at all, right? You see all these parents and they're yelling, hustle, hustle, hustle. And, and all the kids are turning around looking, saying, I thought I was, what the heck are you talking about? And it's really not until you define what those behaviors are that they understand, right? It's diving for a ball or sprinting back or, all those little details that's when they start to understand. And so really when I started down this path, it really wasn't meant to be external at all. It was really just meant, maybe for my basketball team and our company. And, so I spent a couple of years kind of building out a framework. So hustle stands for hard work, unrelenting, smarter, not just harder, take chances, learn from others, and enjoy the process. And within those, there's a lot of different kind of behaviors that really successul people follow.
No, it's a good acronym. It's a really good acronym.
Yeah. Well, and hustle has a different reaction to everyone, right? Everyone, there's even some kind of segment of the world today that's almost like anti-hustle. And I understand why, because hustle in some cases has been painted as a burnout, right? And the reality is that's not the point, right? I mean, those that really hustle, they're not burning out. They're enjoying the grind. They're enjoying getting better. They're enjoying the process of improvement. So ultimately, where it kind of came about is then as I was kind of releasing it internally of, here are some behaviors and here's things we can do at McClone. I started to, have other businesses in the community that were like, hey, what is this hustle thing? Could we kind of talk about it? And, at the same point, I was getting reached out by a lot of younger leaders that, I've just been fortunate. I've learned from a lot of really smart people before me, and they were asking me questions about, would I be their mentor and their coach and things like that. And I frankly just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. And so me, along with my business partner, Chris Burns, we basically built out kind of a coaching, training, mastermind structure with Hustle as really a way to help, leaders that want to make their organization better, make themselves better, kind of a platform to grow from. And it's been, I tell you what, the podcast, you mentioned that it's been so much fun because, prior to this, I was very much in the insurance lane. And, ultimately it's how you and I connected, right? I'm fortunate I'm getting connected with so many people outside of that space and frankly, learning a lot along the way and getting a ton of energy from it. So it's been a lot of fun.
What's that been like, branching out like that for leaders and entrepreneurs out there who are in an established business to branch out into something totally different, totally new? What has that been like?
Well, I tell you what, it's I tell a lot of people there was a significant imposter syndrome. And in a lot of cases, I think there still is, right? I'll never forget when I first kind of rolled it out and said, all right, I'm going to do a podcast and there's this hustle thing. Man, I stared at I was going to add it to my LinkedIn. I'll never forget it. And I'm sitting there with my wife and I'm like, I don't know if I can press this button. I just don't know, this is going to, and really, because to me it was, well, who am I to say what is hustle or what isn't? And I was fortunate. I was just surrounded by enough people that basically just said like, well, what do you got to lose? Like, it's not like people are going to be upset about it. Just go out, try it, see where it goes. And it's, I think a lot of people deal with that. It's the fear of judgment, fear of failure. There's a guy named Steve Jones. He's He's written a book called The Twin Thieves, and it talks about that. And it's really what holds so many people back, is, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. And it's really once I got through that, just took a leap, took a chance. And it's been incredible, though, to your point, to getting outside of my comfort zone. If you would have told me 18 months ago that I'd be not only having a podcast, but I'd be a guest on a podcast like this that, has great reach and a great following, I would have said you're crazy. But that's been the fun part. And it's, the age old thing, just take one step at a time and keep moving forward, and some really good things can happen.
Yeah. I think so much of it comes from commitment. I was listening to a different podcast the other day, and I can't remember which one, and I feel terrible about it, but I'll tag them in this because it was a great point, a great podcast. But he was talking about when he first started public speaking, and he'd go and they'd book him and he'd show up, and there'd be like 4 or 5 college kids there. And he's like, what am I doing? Is this worth it? Is this worth my time? Is this worth my energy? Is this worth my effort? But he was committed to it. He was committed to building out that practice, bringing out that value, and filling venues and speaking in front of giant conferences. And he knew that was going to happen one day. So every time he played this shitty, dinky little event with a half dozen people in it, it was one less of those he was ever going to have to do because he was committed to it. And I think that's where it stems from. Like when you have imposter syndrome at the beginning, if you're committed to the destination, then every podcast you do with 5 downloads, every piece of content you put out there that gets 20 views, it's one less event that isn't going to have the outcome that you want if you're committed to it.
Absolutely. I mean, so many people say, well, that person was an overnight success. Then you talk to them, they're like, well, I've been doing this for 15 years. It's the little by little. Yeah. I mean, I use the example of even our first few podcasts. I mean, if you went back, listen to our first few podcasts, I mean, they were awful.
They're not good. I'm not talking about yours. I'm talking about mine. They're not good.
They all are. They all are, right? I mean, we all suck initially, right? So, which is fine, right? Like you just got to get up and get a little bit better. And yeah, it's interesting. We talk about successful people. You talk about that commitment and that persistence of just never giving up. It is a consistent behavior you see from so many people, because it's like anything, right? If I go work out once a month for 3 months, nothing's going to happen. I'll be sore. That's about it, right? Like nothing's going to happen. But if you show up each and every day, and even if it's small, right? I mean, you see all these success stories where people are, maybe working out 10 minutes a day, but now they're doing it every day, and they do it for 6 months, and they're almost their whole lifestyle changes in a lot of ways. And it's because people think you need to make these big grandiose moves, when in the reality it's the 1% that tends to add up over time that really makes an impact.
How do you couple that with the hustle mentality? It's a long-term strategy to get to the destination that you want. 1% a day, little bit at a time. That seems to be counterintuitive to the idea of hustle mentality, where you're working your ass off for something that you want to achieve.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So first of all, to me, hustle, it all starts with a mindset. There's a lot of people that I talk to, that may not agree with some of the things I say about hustle. And my thing is that's fine. Like everybody's got their own mindset. But for those that, really want to achieve something that frankly they maybe never thought was possible for themselves. So that, really where I tie it together is the H and the U. So the H stands for hard work. And because nothing happens without hard work. The problem though is even hard work is defined differently for people. So I define it as it's, putting the hours in, it's your pace of play, and it's your prioritization. So the 3 Ps basically. And the idea being is if you don't put the hours in, nothing's going to happen, right? There's a lot of people that talk about, I'm going to be super efficient and I'm going to do excellent time management, and that's fine. But really, to get something that matters, you got to put some time into it, right? And then, pace of play. I use the example of I used to work at an auto dealer when I was younger, and this is when the only games on the computer was solitaire and Minesweep, right? And it'd be a rainy day at the auto dealer, And it was amazing how you saw the difference in people. The 90% of the salespeople, that's what they were doing. They were playing solitaire minesweep. They weren't, because nobody was buying a car. But the 10%, the ones that really hustled, they're calling former clients. They're on the phone. They're getting referrals. They're doing all the things, because that way, when it's a sunny day, they're going to be jammed. And, so that you got to put the hours in, you got to have the pace, and then prioritization, right? There's a lot of people that, will show up, put the time in, but they don't do anything while they're there, right? Well, you got to focus on the highest priority. But then, so that's like the hard work is the foundation. Like, nothing good happens without hard work. But then, to your point, how do you reconcile the U actually is for unrelenting, right? Which is really around persistence, never giving up, because, I use the example of, you think of like a sprinter, right? When a sprinter is in the last 3 feet of a race, right? They stretch out, and that's often how they win. The challenge is in life, you don't know where the finish line is. So you see it so many times where people give up like right before they're at the finish line, but they can't see it, right? And they think they're, I've been trying. And so, but that's where the mindset comes in, right? Like those that really want to hustle, they know they're committed to the process. They're committed to the discipline, because they know what's going to happen. They just don't know when. And I think so often we face goals where we set a time frame on it, which, don't get me wrong, like setting time frames is good because it creates urgency. But it's one of these things like, if you set a big goal and you set a timeline, I'm going to do this in 12 months, but it happens in 18. Is that really the end of the world? No. I mean, sometimes it's going to take 18. Sometimes it's going to happen in 3. It's really just, do you have that commitment?
I think people also fall into a problem with that too, where they'll set a goal, and once they hit it, they'll stop. I think it was in Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman's book. He talks about a study of New York cab drivers. And cab drivers, they have a goal for themselves to make $200 in a day or whatever, $300 in a day. On a nice spring day, you got to be driving all over Manhattan all day to get to that 300. But you get a crappy fall day, rain coming in sideways, they can make $200-$300 by 11 o'clock. Yeah. And most of those cab drivers on those days would stop when they got to $300. They'd stop at 11 o'clock. They said, I hit my goal, I'm going home. And why not get ahead of it? Why not make it easier? You earn $900 on those crappy days, so that maybe you don't have to work till midnight to get to 300 on the beautiful summer days. And I find it challenging for myself. Comfort is the enemy of growth. We all get so comfortable. How do you coach people to not only achieve their goals, but blow past it if they realize that those goals were significantly more achievable than they had thought?
That's exactly right. So, I mean, we were literally just actually having this conversation inside our walls at McClone this past week with a few people, and it was exactly that. It was, if you hit your goals for the week, let's say, do you just take off? Well, the reality is, if in most things in life, the action and the result are more disconnected in time than we think, right? And so, I use sales as an example, right? If you hit your sales goal for the week, but maybe you haven't hit your activity targets, well, I mean, unless you're in a super transactional world, the behaviors you're doing really are they're not for that week. There might be for months or even years into the future, right? And so it's having that discipline. One of the things I've seen from the most successful people is they're really, really good at changing the game to kind of trick their brain, right? I mean, the reality is our brains are super powerful, but they're super dumb at times, right? Like, I mean, you can really play some tricks on yourselves. And, it's funny. I've seen it, even for myself, where, I'll set a goal for, let's say our organization for a certain growth target, maybe 3 or 4 years in the future. And all of a sudden we're a year and a half into it. And in my head, I've already changed the goal. And then, but I had written it down somewhere. Right. And so then all of a sudden I look back and I'm like, man, that was my goal. Man, that's not even my goal anymore. That just seems so minuscule. But at the time that seemed like such a big goal. And sometimes it goes the other way, right? Sometimes it's like, man, I thought, I thought this was going to be a lot easier than I thought. And I've always seen that, that's the thing with discipline and having the mindset of, what is my real reason why? I've seen that, for people that being driven by money is not a bad thing, by the way. A lot of people, that's a really key focus, and it should be. The most successful people, though, they're driven by, maybe money, but then it's something else too, right? And it's being a role model, being the best, being the best version of themselves, right? There's something else eating at them. And, I use Michael Jordan as the example. He said this, I think it was in his Last Dance series, where he would say, like, if I didn't have something on my opposition, I would just make it up. I just make up a story in my head that they said something bad about me or bad about my team, just because that gave me that little extra fuel. And, everybody's got their thing, that might be it for some people. It might be, other things for others, but, it's finding that thing that makes you tick, that really creates that fuel. So, I use the example for myself. 3:00 on a Friday. This is my entire career. This has been it. From 3 to 3:15 on a Friday, I am like a useless human being. Like, just, I'm a waste of space, because I've been cranking really hard all week. And it's like that 3:00 where it's like, you know what? Maybe I should just cash it in, call it a week. It's been a long week. And so from 3 to 3:15, I'm almost in a daze, and it's amazing how predictable it is. And then it's like about 3:15, all of a sudden I realize, wait a second. If I hang it up now, that's just more work this weekend I'm going to do. And you know what? I'm going to spend the next hour or two cranking it, because I want to prepare myself so that I can have some family time, in the weekend. Right. But it's just knowing those things about yourself. I mean, it took me years to kind of figure that out. And I tell you what, those, I actually had a conversation with somebody this morning where they're like, man, you really stack yourself up on a Friday afternoon. And I'm like, I do, because if I don't, then I get in my head, like, the more stacked up I am, the better. In the middle of the week, you're already running. You've got the energy. You're surrounded by everybody else. It's those times where, you're by yourself, or you're the only one cranking, that you got to find ways to motivate yourself.
So can you turn that off, or are you still a blob from 3 to 3:15 on Fridays?
I still am. It really is. Like, I would love to say I have the secret, but I think I've found tricks, right? Like, if I schedule things over that time, right, then I'm less of a blob, and I can kind of push it back. But it's pretty predictable. And again, I'd love to say there's a way around it, but again, my view is, it's just, that's learning about yourself, right? We all have those things. We have those habits. I mean, to me, like, one habit I've learned from other people that's been really helpful is, if I plan my day the night before, I pop out of bed, because I feel like I got to get so much done, and I'm excited for the day. When I don't, I start off slow, because I'm like, what do I got to do today? What's on the docket? And it's just that little piece where, I got to get up, I got to get out of bed. Let's start cranking. And it takes 4 or 5 minutes the night before, right? It's not rocket science, but I learned it from other people, and it's worked really well for me.
Yeah, it's incredible how there's always so much to do. And you walk in, you say, I've got 1,000 things I can do. You barely do any of them. But if there's 5 things you're going to do, almost always get all of those 5 things
You bet.
done.
Yeah, you bet.
Or at least make progress on them.
That's exactly right. So I have I pick a big 3 every day, right? And so my kind of the daily goal setting, I grab 3 things, try to go, and I would say I maybe get 50% of them done on a consistent basis. But I tell you what, when I don't write down my big 3 the night before, I don't get any of them done, right? So, you do a lot of stuff throughout the day, but it's kind of that 80-20 focus, right? I mean, you're in the same boat, right? I mean, running an organization, you get pulled in so many directions. You can always be busy, but what is the 20% of things that you can be doing that's really going to drive your organization forward? Those are the things you got to get done first. And my experience has been, whether it's maybe just me, but I've seen it from others too, is if I don't write down what those things are for the next day, I'll get really tied into the busy really quickly. And all of a sudden, it's a week has gone by and you're like, man, what the heck did I do? and I was busy. I was cranking, and I felt like I was working hard, but like I use the example of if you think about like hard work, right? Everybody kind of thinks about what that is. Well, imagine if I had a huge farm field and I decided to mow it with like not even like an electrical mower, but like the old time, like 1920s, like push cutter. Well, I could work really, really hard, but that's not really effective. There there are better ways to get that done now, and I think a lot of times that's what we get tied into. It's like it's the badge of honor of I'm working really hard. Well, it's like, and that's great. Like, don't get me wrong, that's a key part of it. But if you're working hard on stuff that doesn't matter, well, then what are you really doing?
Well, it's being deliberate about it. We've got our own lawn mowing analogy. It's like, what's going to be better? You got a lawn mowing business and you got a whole neighborhood to mow. Well, I'm going to mow a quarter of this front yard here, and then I'm going to go get started on the backyard over there, and then I'm going to do the sides, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish up this front yard, and then I'm going to go. Or do you get 3 houses lined up next to each other and do all 3 front yards at the same time, going back and forth and back and forth? And it's that deliberation. These are the big 3 things I'm going to get done today that are going to have the most impact on my business. And you're deliberate about doing it instead of saying, I got all these lawns to mow. I'm going to go so that one over here. I'm going to do a little bit of that one over there. That one's in the shade. I'm going to go do that one over there right now. It looks nice and easy. And I think a lot of it goes back to, it can all trace back to that root of your why. Because if you know why you want to do, it makes it a lot easier to say, what am I going to do?
I even think about you mentioned that like the age-old multitasking, right? Which nobody can do, right? It's just task jumping. It's not multitasking. And, we know that it takes, 15 minutes for somebody to get back into a groove after they change tasks. And, some of us super warriors think we can do it faster, and maybe we can, but it's still probably 10 minutes, right? Like
to really get back on track.
Yeah. And so to your point, I love the idea of kind of hopping around to the lawns, because that's exactly what it is. It's like, oh, well, this email came in, so I'm going to go to this person's front yard. And now, this text message came in, so I'm going to go to this backyard over here. And it's like, that's a great way to waste a day.
Yep. And we're such slaves to it. I stopped wearing my Apple Watch probably 7 or 8 months ago. And for a month after I stopped wearing it, anytime my phone was in my back pocket and it buzzed, I instinctively looked at my watch, even though there was nothing there. And the amount of distractions in this world to get us off focus, it's so easy. I heard somebody say that so many of us are missing out on the absolute best productivity tool known to man. You know what it is? Airplane mode. For this hour, I have this task I'm going to work on, and I'm going to turn on airplane mode. Other than my kids' school calling me because one of them is in the hospital, I can't think of anything that can't stand for me to get back to them within an hour.
100%. Yeah, I use a very similar analogy. I mean, my best work is when I'm on a plane. I actually was just traveling this week, and those few hours where you can just be on a plane, you can have your laptop up. I mean, it's something I talk about with hustle, because if you look around a plane, it's actually kind of a little bit of a microcosm of people that are hustling or not. Because to your point, the airplane mode, right? Like if you're on a flight and you're trying to achieve your goals, right? Like it is some of the best, most productive time you could possibly have, because everybody's focused on other stuff, right? And to your point, you can turn on Wi-Fi, right? And so I usually turn on Wi-Fi. And so then you could certainly get sucked into email or text and things like that. But it's really easy not to. And so one of the things when I look around a plane, I was just thinking about this again this week. I just got back yesterday. There's 3 types of people on the plane. There's the sleepers. There's the entertainment seekers, right? All the people that are watching their movies or playing their game. And then there's the hustlers, right? It's the people with their laptop up and they're just like, I'm using this time. And it's such a small example, right? And, some people that just may be their thing. But my thing is, even when I travel with my family, like I'm always got my laptop up, because my thing is that's 2 or 3 hours I can get done. So whenever we get to where we're going to get to, I mean, my kids and wife, they want to watch their movies and sleep and all that sort of stuff. Like that's great. But that's time for me to really go get something done. And now I can get it done. So whenever I get there, I'm better prepared. And it's funny, like once you see it, you kind of look around a plane all the time. You're like, man, there is really only 3 types of people on a plane. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So how do you balance it out? I mean, it sounds like you're doing a pretty good job. You're coaching your kids' basketball teams. But how do you balance out the hustle in the home? How do you make sure that not just your family, but yourself are getting the attention they deserve outside of this idea of success?
Yeah. So this is, to me, this is the crux of why some people have a negative reaction to hustle, because they assume it has to be singular focused. So, the example is so when you start from a 30,000 foot view, right? Before you're talking about hard work and not giving up and all that sort of stuff, all the hustle pieces, it starts with, what the heck do you want to be in life? Right? Because you can apply it to anything. This isn't just business and your career, right? You can apply it to anything. You can apply it to fitness. So like, for me, when I think of through the lens of basically what I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good business leader, and I want to be, community minded, right? So I'm giving back to the community and being, kind of a net giver. And a lot of people would look at me and say like, yeah, but it seems crazy that husband and father come before your business. I mean, you're there's a lot of sacrifices you make. And I said, yeah, well, being a good father and a good husband doesn't just mean that I don't work and I'm not career minded. In a lot of ways, me being a role model for my kids, me being a provider for my family, right? Like those are part of being a husband and father. But if I was gone all the time and I was absent, that doesn't really work either, right? And so it's, to me, it's really about defining what that is. So like, as an example, actually, this is how I got into youth coaching. So when my son was heading into third grade, we were out in the backyard playing hoops. And, all of a sudden I walk in and I'm talking to my wife and I'm like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And she's like, he's in third grade. How many times prior to this have you been in the backyard shooting hoops with him? And I was like, man, and that hurt. Like that was just, and I was like, man, it has not been many. The kid's in third grade now. And it was at that moment I decided to coach him, because I said, look, this is clearly a priority. I want to have a relationship with my kids. And it wasn't like I wasn't around, right? But I was getting too singular focused. And so to me, it's really about kind of laying out what are those categories that you want, and then applying hustle to all of it, right? So, one of the things I realized as a husband and as a father is, it's the put the hours in, right? Like there is an element of you do just have to be around a little bit, but one of the things my wife, a lot of these things I learned from my, wife basically coaching me. So I take credit for it, but a lot of it was just her conversation with me. But when my daughter was young, my son had just been born. I think my daughter might have been 3 and my son was 1. And, my wife kind of had the conversation of, hey, do you want to be around ever? Right. I mean, I was working every weekend. I was working long nights, and, and I said, well, yeah, of course I want. She's like, all right, well, we got to set some ground rules. And so we still live it to this day, where she's like, look, I don't care how early you get in. Just pick a time when you need to be home. Right. And so my deal is I can get in whenever I want, but I just have to be, she wants me home by 6. Now she gives me a ton of carve outs, if I'm at, events and things like that. But, I home at 6, and then Fridays I'm home at 5. Like, and then Saturday mornings I can get up early and I can go do whatever the heck I want. Right. But like, those were kind of the guardrails. And I tell you what, it's made all the difference, because there's plenty of Fridays, even though I talk about my 3 o'clock, there's plenty of Fridays where you're like, you know what, I'm going to sit here till 7 or 8 o'clock and just get it done. But it was, kind of making those cuts, but there were other sacrifices. I mean, quite frankly, I didn't, because of kind of my priority list, there are a lot of people that were in my life, friends and things like that I haven't been around for as much. Right. And it's because you do have to make choices. I tell a lot of people, there's not a lot of things I do outside of those things, right? It's like, if I'm not around my family and I'm not around my business, I'm not in the community, I'm probably not doing anything. I'm probably sleeping, because I'm kind of laser focused on, that's what I define success for me, and be the best version of myself. But it's that constant, balance. And so that to me is the biggest thing you talk about, how do you apply it to things? It's deciding for yourself, do you want to be a, super fit person? I mean, I'll be blunt. I'm not a model of fitness. And it's just because in my level of priorities, it's number 5. And unfortunately, the other 4 take a lot more of my time. And so, taking care of yourself matters, right? I try to do the best I can, but at the same point, it's not my number one goal isn't to be a fitness model. It's just not my thing. So,
well, how do you prioritize that? How do you prioritize yourself so that not only can you be the best leader that you can, the best father that you can, the best husband and partner that you can, but also the best you that you can? How do you strike that balance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you, if you find it out perfectly, I'll find that person, because it's I'm certainly not striking a perfect balance by any stretch, but to me it's there's different cycles in life too. So there's times where I'll use basketball coaching as an example. One of the advantages of coaching my son's team is that was time with my son, and frankly I was active, right? So that you find ways to kill 2 birds with one stone, right? And when you have scarcity, you gotta make those decisions. And so to me, time's like everything, right? Like this is not a straight line by any means, but it's the way I try to kind of keep coming back to it is every quarter. So every quarter I kind of take a reassessment of my life. What's the last 90 days that I've done? What do I really want in the next 90 days? And it takes me maybe an hour and a half. And I go back to kind of my core, my core 4 really of, okay, what do I really want it to be defined as? And, to your point, my 5th is, my own health, right? So I'm no good to anybody if I'm dead, right? So how do you prioritize that? And so there's, times where it's, what, this quarter, I just know, I'll use an example, this first quarter this year, hoops for my kid, it was 4 days a week and most weekends. That was third grade, it wasn't that, right? It wasn't that level of commitment, but that was a lot. Like, yeah, that meant I wasn't necessarily going to the gym, right? I wasn't, doing workout, but I was at practice, and that kind of drove it, versus now this next quarter, it's done. I've hung up the whistle, right? So, now it's, okay, how do I incorporate that in? Because if I don't, it's going to get ugly really quick. So it's, to me, it's about, everybody's got so many different pressures coming from outside. It's how do you continue to take stock in, okay, what am I really trying to do again? What's really my recentering? And again, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are far more disciplined than me that can just nail that balance all the time. But, to me, it's as long as I recenter myself, I don't get off track for very long, right? I might, as dumb as it sounds, right? You might fall off the wagon for 3 months, but if you're rechecking every 3 months, you can catch up pretty quick.
Yeah, it's like anytime you fall behind your goals, just don't let it happen again. Just get back up towards the line. Try and get above the line, because you're going to fall back. It's that stupid LinkedIn meme. Progress and success doesn't look like this. It looks like this. Which is great podcasting, me waving my arm around in the air. But anyway. So how is your team, how is your company taken to this whole hustle culture? How do you instill it in them? What's been the results? And I'm sure some of them don't have as much insight into it as you, that hustle doesn't mean burn yourself out.
Yeah. So, when it really started, it wasn't even around, I didn't call it hustle because, quite frankly, I had the imposter syndrome, right? So it was like, and I didn't know if I really had anything, right? So I incorporated, kind of leading with behavior change and things like that. And, our company is like a lot of, groups of people, right? There are different people that have different mindsets, right? And, some people want to achieve and drive, and there's others at work specifically, right? And there's others that, again, their prioritization and categorization is just a little bit different, right? And so that doesn't mean they don't want to hustle, but they might be at different levels. The most amazing thing, though, to me was how contagious it was. So, you can kind of see this if you kind of relate it to sports, right? If you see somebody diving for a ball, the next player is more likely to do the same. And, to me, it certainly started with, let's just talk about it. Let's, talk about what behaviors that is and things like that. It has legs of its own once it's more, call it player led, right? More, team member led, where they're challenging each other, right? And it was one of these things I'll never forget. This is maybe 18 months ago. And all of a sudden I started to hear our team use the word hustle. And it wasn't in that negative tone, right? It was in the positive tone. And it was because what we kept on coming back to was, as a team, if we could out hustle our competition, that's going to always outperform skills, right? And by the way, hustle builds skills too, right? But, if you think of a team that, doesn't have that drive, doesn't have that hustle, doesn't have that mindset of, what are we really trying to achieve versus the team that does, right? I mean, the team that does is going to win all day, every day. And so that was the most interesting thing to me. And look, we're still driving it every day, right? I mean, just this past week, we were having a conversation actually about the H, about, what are the different pieces. And, as I share with people, like, the easiest way, if you're falling short of your goal, like the easiest way to get closer is just spend more time on it. Right? Like we can talk about being efficient. We can talk about, learning from others and there's lots of shortcuts, but like the simplest way is if you could just spend more time on it. If you're not hitting your fitness goals and you just decide to spend more time on it, even if you're really inefficient, you're going to be closer. Right. And again, there's shortcuts to this stuff as well. But yeah, that's been the most interesting thing to me. And how, beyond inside our walls, even outside our walls, one of the coolest things, we have our company party celebrating our success last year. And we get everybody together, and how many family members of our team came up to me and talked about it like that. And like, because I did different videos and things like that for people. They're like, I shared this with, my kid, or I shared this with my sibling or whatever. And it was because, that it just resonated with me. And like that got me. It was not certainly what I thought was going to happen. You never know when these things start, but what I recognize is, everybody has passion for stuff. Everybody wants to get better. They're just looking for, okay, what's that structure? And what's been cool for me of this hustle piece, even for myself, I lie to myself, right? Like all of a sudden I go back and like, am I putting the time in? Am I learning from others? Am I not giving up? Am I really committing, or am I not? Right. Because we all lie to ourselves. Right. And so as a team, it's been cool because they bought into it. It's become kind of almost a pseudo brand for us, which has been fun. And we've been rapid growth. We're top 1% in our industry already, and we'll probably double in about a 3.5 year period. And it's all because of the people. I mean, our team just, they have their why, they know what we're trying to accomplish, and they get up every day and want to go get it.
That's awesome. Dustin, this has been great. Really appreciate it. Dustin McClone. If people want to reach out to you about McClone Insurance or about Hustle Mindset, Hustle Nation, what's the best way for them to find you?
So the easiest way is LinkedIn. Quite frankly, I'm on LinkedIn a ton. So you certainly can reach out there. Otherwise, McClone.com or hustleleaders.com. Those are the two websites. Or check out our podcast, Hustle Nation Podcast. It's been a labor of love and a ton of fun, but people are enjoying it. We're just having a lot of great time. But Travis, I appreciate the time today. It's been fun to see your success and even how you're framing the world in talent. And, I'm certainly excited to spend some time here today, and hope to have future discussions as well.
I appreciate that, Dustin. Well, I got to go get my to-do list ready for Monday. Make sure that I got that in plan. Big thanks to Noah Cuff, our producer. This has been Hired the Podcast. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.